What up, though? Back with another Woodward Pistons. Excited to be joined by some of the best draft evaluators, best NBA draft sickos there are out there in Corey Tulaba and Albert Ghim of the No Ceilings Collective. They both host the NBA Draftdaq show, which has been going on for about 2 or 3 years. It's how I ran into them and how I got interested more in draft stuff. And I didn't tell you all this before, but I think you two are the most entertaining draft show out there. The thing that bothered me the most when I dove into more draft podcasts and media are the I am so excited to talk about this prospect today type of podcasts and stuff. And it's like, just, you don't sound excited. What are you doing? That's never been an issue for you two. You get into it, you go deep, you dive into film, you keep it real with everything. So again, Corey is the coach in the New York area. Albert and he have just been chopping it up and really setting the standard for draft coverage the last 2 or 3 years with No Ceilings. If you're not subscribed to No Ceilings, you should go do that first and foremost. NoCeilingsNBA.com. Substack there. They put out multiple articles, multiple podcasts every week. If you want complete draft coverage, there is no better place than there with Albert and with Corey and the rest of the No Ceilings crew. So thanks again, guys, for being here.
I'm excited to be here, man. It's been too long.
Appreciate you having us on, Steve. You actually reached out to us a while ago, so I want to apologize on air for being so late and finally jumping on. It's been an absolute just, I don't even know the word, avalanche, hurricane, whatever you want to throw out there. It's been pretty wild for us, but we're excited to be on today. Excited to talk about the draft.
Yeah, I mean, y'all doing big things, showing up in the Victor Wembanyama documentary on ESPN and everything. That's amazing. So
yeah, very cool stuff going on all around for us, for sure.
Yeah. So here today, we are talking about our Pistons, of course. Joe D and I here want to ask you all about a couple things at number 5. I mean, we've gone through the gamut of players that most Pistons fans want to hear about, namely Jarace Walker, Cam Whitmore, Asar Thompson, Taylor Hendricks. Those have been the ones that have been the most discussed at number 5. I've run through a breakdown of those 4 dudes a lot. I definitely have my favorite, which I won't give away quite yet. But I know both of you have been pitching 2 prospects in particular in the top 5 up there for a while. Number 1 being Bryce Sensabaugh from Ohio State, and the other one being Jett Howard from my University of Michigan. I'm a Michigan alum. And I've linked them quite a bit, honestly, because I see a lot of similarities in their profile. Again, you can hate me, all you Michigan alum. You can hate me, all you Ohio State people, but they definitely have connections. So I know one of y'all is really high on Brice. The other one's really high on Jett. It's why I wanted to get bananas, as the title of this says, about pick number 5 and consider why should we consider these guys at number 5. So let's start with Bryce Simon at number 5. Corey, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I guess I'll preface this by saying I have Brice 5th on my big board, and I don't necessarily know if I would recommend taking him with the 5th pick, because I think when you're high up in this range, mocks are definitely not the end all be all of how the draft's going to go. We know that. We see it play out every single year. If it was easy enough that teams just went by the mocks, then we wouldn't have to have the draft, right? But I think that Bryce Sensabaugh is talented enough that I don't understand why he's not being talked about in that range outside of maybe any kind of injury concerns. And to be fair, there are injury concerns. He had knee surgery in high school. He had knee surgery at the end of the season that shut him down early, and he was just cleared, I believe, last week or so to start working out for teams. But I don't think his value is that of being taken up in the top 5. Now, I've had conversations with NBA front offices, and basically the feeling is it's like this guy is a lock to be a good player. Like, he is a lock there to be a like what I heard last time I asked an NBA team, lock to be a 1st round pick, because we're starting to see him fall even out of the 1st round in certain mock drafts, and maybe that's because of the knee injury concerns. But I think when it comes to his actual skills and his breakdown offensively, there's an argument to be made that he is the best shooter in this class, above Keontae George, above Grady Dick, above Jordan Hawkins, above Jett Howard. All of these guys who we project to be the best shooters. Brice shot 48, 40, 83 as a freshman. Probably the best, mid-range shot maker that we've seen from the guard spot in a number of years. And as it's not like the 3-point shot wasn't on good volume, it was over 11 attempts per 100 possessions. So he's getting him up all over the floor. He could play on or off the ball. And I just think like this is a guy whose skill level is just significantly higher than a lot of the prospects that are being mocked ahead of him. And it's not like he's, this frail guy who's going to have trouble with the physicality of the league. He is a big, strong man, 6'6", long arms, physical, 235. He looks like he's in better shape now because one of the going along with talking about the strength as a positive, he does need to slim down a bit and turn some of that into just like lean muscle. And he's looked leaner in pre-draft, videos and photos and whatnot. So he's taking his body seriously, and hopefully, losing a little bit of that weight will be less stress on his knees. But we had a player tell us that straight up, like he is the best scorer that he's ever played with. Sneaky athletic, can go between his legs, can dunk between the legs. You'd never expect it because he plays a skill-based game. And a lot of times we think of these, how important athleticism is, but it's not that important if guys can't use it correctly on the court. And right now in the NBA, it's about skill, it's about IQ, it's about feel. And I just think that his skill level is absolutely off the charts. And as a scorer, there's not many guys that you can really argue were better than him this year as a freshman. So that's why I'm so high on him. Again, I think if you're looking at the Pistons with that 5th pick, and there are certainly rumors that they might be looking to trade down, or teams are targeting Detroit at least at that 5th pick. Maybe it's the type of thing where you turn 5 into a couple of different things and you target Brice at a later pick. Let's say, Orlando wanted to do something with Detroit. Maybe they really wanted somebody available at 5, didn't think they'd be able to get him. And they get 6'11", and maybe Detroit gives up another asset, whatever. And Brice, you take him at 11. Like that's something I feel like would be, a worthwhile bet. But yeah, you need shooting, you need scoring in this league. He's strong, he's physical. He's going to be able to, I think, defend as he matures as a player. A lot of young players struggle on that end. So that's why I'm high on him. I just think the skill level and the production level is just off the charts. 40 points per 100. Like that's the only guy to do that recently is Zion. So to give you a name of like how good he is at putting the ball in the basket, I think he's going to be a pretty dang good player.
So can you talk about the difference? You said I have him number 5, but I wouldn't advise taking him 5th. What if you're like the lead scout and your top 4 goes and you have number 5 pick? How do you reconcile that of just saying, well, this guy's 5th for you, why don't you just take him at number 5?
Yeah, well, I think that there's certainly a game of chess that you have to play. And that's why I would say that, maybe we should trade down, get our guy, and pick up assets along the way, because that 5th pick does have value. This is not like, hey, we have the 15th pick in the draft, so let me take a swing here, and it doesn't really matter when you get to that pick. Like when you get to the 15 area, everything starts to mesh together. There are going to be guys that other teams are going to value more than Bryce Sensabaugh. So just from a value perspective, I think that you could further your franchise by taking that pick and selling it to a team that wants to pay a premium for it to get somebody that they value more. So if you have Brice ahead of that guy, why not pick up an extra asset, move down a little bit, and still, potentially be in a spot, or make sure that you were in a spot that you could still get your guy. So I think, there are a lot of teams that should do that, but this is the time of year that teams fall in love with like the glamour muscles. They want to talk about the guys who are workout warriors, who are jumping out of the gym and kissing the rim and, look great. But like at one point it just comes down to like, well, can you hoop? Like the tools are great. And I think that Brice has tools, and I also think he could hoop. So he's kind of, to me, he's like a mesh of both worlds. And look, I don't have access to his medical records. So if his knees really are trash, like, obviously that changes things and where I would have him on my board, but I don't have access to that. And at this point, like, I've reached out to teams to try to figure it out. And a lot of teams are pretty tight-lipped about it. I mean, they don't want to have this stuff get leaked to, necessarily. So, but as far as talent and the value, I just think teams are going to value guys like Cam Whitmore, like the Thompsons, some of the other guys that are in the mix more based on reputation and value. And that's why I wouldn't advise taking him there. But I think that if you had a plan to target him later on a trade down, I think that's the avenue that you roll with.
So last question and scenario here. It's kind of a mesh up of two questions here. Nobody wants to trade down with the Pistons at 5. They're like, you know what? The deal that we're looking at, it's not that great. You're still stuck there with the pick. Do you still take Brice at 5 if it's you? And you're like, okay, this guy's 5th on my board. I take him. And I ask this because your comparison, one of the comparisons that you've given to Brice is DeMar DeRozan, which is apropos. He takes over 40% of his offense in the mid-range. He shot 49.5% in the mid-range, which is ridiculous. Super good. It's one of the few guys that I would say don't stop doing this because you are so good at it. You can't take that part away from his game without severely limiting what kind of player he can be. The other one that I've heard is from Brian J. Shout out Brian J. He said Paul Pierce. He did a lot of like statistical analysis, breakdown, and body type similar. And Pierce was, criticized for looking fat and whatever. And he's a shooting guard kind of that's like 6'7", 230. Brice might end up being there on the wing at 6'6", like 230 as well. And they do a lot of similar things, especially their like turnaround shot and their back to the basket game in the mid range. So again, at 5, this would be what you would be arguing for, right? Is somewhere like that. Like this is the next DeMar DeRozan. This is like a Paul Pierce type player who we're overlooking because of the body stuff or because they have a game that they do really well at, but it's also not in style or in vogue with the rest of the NBA.
I really like the Paul Pierce one too, actually. I do think that's a pretty apt comparison.
And same. It's the one that
yeah.
made me kind of turn on him because I'm still not fully sold on him, but it's hard not to see it, right?
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, the scoring production on the percentages and efficiency, it's like, it's hard to be like, no, he was good. Like when he was on the floor, he was producing on the offensive end. So at a really high level. I guess my first question at 5, there's no trade down options, is one, is Jarace Walker on the board? That's my first question, because if Jarace Walker is on the board, take Jarace, please. But if not, I mean, look, I think that it's certainly a pick that if you don't have job security, you are taking a risk on it. And the first thing you would have to be confident in is that the medicals absolutely are going to check out. But if the medicals checked out, I mean, why not get your guy? I mean, too often, what are you going to go by the draft board because, Anthony Black or Grady Dick are rated higher right now? Like, these things don't ever play out the way, ESPN's rankings or consensus rankings play out. If you believe in him and this guy, you have good intel, his knees are healthy, you saw him in a workout, he looked good, like, why not just take your guy, even if, you're going to get flack for it? But we know that that's not how the real world operates. And, people are going to be upset because he's not this guy that's being hyped up as the next best thing. But I mean, it was a year ago, Jabari Smith was getting hyped up as a no-brainer number 1. And now, I bet Houston likes him, but probably would make some different decisions down the board. And then you have a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who took Jalen Williams in the lottery when he was not rated as a lottery pick by most of the internet. That was a surprise pick. I know Albert and I did an episode on why we thought he should be a lottery pick, and we asked if he is a lottery pick, so we thought he was valued there, but we didn't think the consensus, he was getting mocked in the 20s. So, they took him in the lottery, and he's from a small school that most people, weren't watching games of. If you have that kind of job security and you truly believe in a guy, if you're actually trying to build a winning team, wouldn't you want to just get your guy?
So that's the case for Brice. We'll come back to it because I have concerns for both these guys, which I want to lay out. But again, I think both Corey and Albert bring great analysis, and the Jalen Williams is a good example. Like, you should listen to these two because they take a different route, not afraid to go out there on a limb, and everybody misses, especially in that like 6 to, I mean, I know it's a large range, but like 6 to 30. There's always 2 or 3 guys in every draft that end up booming more than what the consensus thought would be. And if you can try and identify at least one of those guys every single draft, then you are one of the best, and at least trying to do it is what we're trying to do here, is kind of thinking outside the box and saying, okay, we've considered these, we've talked about them so much. Like you said, there's just this idea that the draft board is set, but we should push back on that always. So number 5, Jett Howard, my Wolverine. What's the case for that, Albert?
I also like Corey. I actually haven't mocked Jett to the Pistons at all. It's just that he's number 5 on my board. And it's not that complicated for me. And I've gotten some crap on the internet about this take, but I'm okay with it. And
I had Johnny Davis number 3 last year, so trust me when I say I know I'm getting crap.
I know I'm right there with you. I had Johnny Davis 4 last season. I still feel great about it because I think Johnny Davis is still going to be good. But when talking about Jett Howard, my thing with him is that I I just love the skill set. I look at him; he's 6'8", big old wing, a guy who really struggled with injury last season in his freshman season at Michigan. The ankle stuff was really tough on him and only got worse. And that's why towards the end of the season, you saw the dip in numbers and the production, even in, in body language at times, right? It was hard for him. Thankfully, Buffkin stepped up and played great and all that stuff. But when we're talking about Jett Howard and his outlook as an NBA player, there's a lot to like. He has great NBA prototypical wing size. I think he's going to be more athletic than what he was able to show off at Michigan, just because, I mean, when it comes to running and jumping and cutting and stuff, those ankles are important. And the fact that he was struggling with those ankle injuries definitely hampered some of that stuff with him. But love the shooting, love the movement shooting. I think the stroke is really fast, really quick, looks really good. And I think he's going to be a really good shooter on the next level. But the biggest thing with him that I think sets him apart from the other guys that maybe in that range or whatever is I think the handle is unbelievable for a guy his size. I think the passing chops are really there, and he's only going to show off more of that. So, like Corey, once again, like he's a guy that, so if Brice is a guy that Corey is in love with, along with Jarace and the other guys that Corey loves, Jett's my number 1 guy. Jett is my favorite player in this class. Not to say that I think he's the best player, but he's just my guy. We all have our guys. And, with me and Jett, it's just, I believe in all of those skills, like his tool bag, just kind of getting like I love the growth potential with all that. I think all that makes sense in the NBA, and we're talking about ultimately building a contender around Cade Cunningham, right? So if we're talking about Detroit specifically, then I don't think it's terrible, right, to add a big shooting wing next to Cade that can also pass the ball, that is a smart, heady player. I am sure that when you get into his concerns, you're going to bring up the defense. Okay, you're going to bring up the rebounding. Absolutely. And you have every right to, because he was abysmal as a rebounder, and that's something he's got to work on. But from what I'm seeing right now with the pre-draft stuff, he's really working on his physique. He's really looking to add upper body strength, which is great for him. Trying to get stronger, I guess, wants to play more physical. Ultimately for me, I think the lineage stuff is important too. I know it's not end all be all. Look at Jordan's kids; they never became NBA players. But I just like his skill set. I like that his dad was Juwan Howard, and he's just my type of guy. So that's my pitch for Jett Howard being in my top 5.
Yeah, can you talk about like the pre-injury Jett versus the post-injury Jett? Because for us Michigan people, Kobe's ascension really took like first, second, and third thought, and first, second, and third like place in our season because of the difference you saw when they let Kobe just cook more, and his defense and all that stuff came around super efficient and all that too. But again, it threw Jett on the back burner of like what he was doing when he was fully healthy, and then when he came back and he's in and out of the lineup. If your main thing is as a shooter, it's really hard to maintain position, like if you're in and out of the lineup, because you got to put him up, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, ankle injuries are tough, right? Any lower half injury is going to be tough to deal with. And it's something that he struggled with for a long time. And, like you mentioned, I think the Bufkin ascension was huge for Michigan and important. And although they didn't make the tournament, and, it's unfortunate for Michigan fans out there, but, with Bufkin's ascension kind of led, Jett to playing more of a supporting role. But, when I look at Jett, I can see it a lot of different ways. I think in the NBA, once he's healthier and he continues to work on his body and he continues to fine tune different aspects of his game, I can see him being a really important part of an offense somewhere as like a number 2 option, maybe even a number 1 option if it all goes well. And I know that's really lofty of me to think that he could potentially become a number 1 option one day. It's just I believe it. I feel it in my gut that he's a guy that's gonna just severely outplay wherever he gets drafted is what I really feel and believe. And so you're right. The ankle injury stuff definitely hampered his production at the end of the season. It's unfortunate, but once again, I also think it was a small sample size, right? You only got to play 1 season in Michigan. So from that season, with what you saw in the first half to the middle towards the end, all you can kind of do is hope that what you saw at the beginning of the season becomes what he is kind of all the time. And, that Iowa game where he went off and had his career high in that game, he really kind of showed it all. He was really just hunting his shot and showed, his offensive versatility, was making some passes. And then, I feel like after that game, he kind of started to go down a little bit. And the injuries, I think, started to really bark more and made it more difficult for him. So anyway, I'm a believer. I want to see him healthy. I hope he ends up in a good situation, and I think he's going to be a really good pro.
So now we move on to the part of the program where I talk about concerns. Again, this is not just to shoot this down, but to talk about warts and everything in their game like we do with everybody. I want to lump the two together because both Jett and Brice have been talked about in the conversation as the best shooter in the draft. But I want to kind of poke holes in that. We'll start with Brice real quick. He might just be really good from one side of the court. From the left wing and from the left corner, Bryce Sensabaugh was 38 of 74, which is 51.3%. That's ridiculous. Like, he almost never misses there. From everywhere else, top of the key, the right wing and the right corner, he was 22 of 73, which is 30.1%. Not fantastic. If you look at his shot chart too, it's blue from top of the key, it's blue from the right wing, it's blue from the right corner. Not a good sign when it's that lopsided. Jett as well. He's a little bit more red. He's more red from the corners. He's red from the right wing, but from that left wing, he was 25 of 79 for 31.6%. And then he was also 11 of 38 from the top of the key, which is 28.9%. I don't know that this is a thing because guys can remake their game, right? And I'm not saying they can't shoot, but in terms of being like the best shooters or the most consistent, these things are concerning. Brice is more concerning for me in particular because it's lopsided. If he went from top of the key right, it's not good. And with Jett, like, you're still a little bit more one side dominant from the longer part of the court over on the right. Not great from top of the key, not great from the left. So can you speak on some of these concerns in terms of being like an elite level shooter? Because if you're taking them at 5, or if you're ranking them at 5, you're saying they are an elite level shooter, maybe even better than somebody like a Grady Dick, who's you would think would be a level below them.
Well, I think when you're comparing him to somebody like Grady, like, there's a lot more self-creation going on with both players. I think Grady's really a guy where, if he's going to put the ball on the floor, and take a 3, it's pump fake, 1 dribble, maybe 2, and before he gets it off. Where I think the responsibility for a guy like Brice or a guy like Jett, there's a little bit more willingness to create and take the tougher shots that are self-created. And, I do think there's value there. I also think, for Brice specifically, like, he was taking a lot more volume from the left side of the floor. It's a spot that he's comfortable from. And I think, honestly, being able to get to your spots and shoot it at volume is a strength. If, he's a really hard guy to stop. But one of the reasons also that I like Brice is I just think that teams in the NBA are going to use him a little bit more creatively. I think that he's so strong that he's going to play some for, and I think he's going to be used in pick and pop situations. I think that he's going to be used more often in movement. I think Ohio State's offense got a little stagnant sometimes, and he's going to be able to, run off pin downs, or you could use him in floppy sets, and that was stuff that he did sometimes, not as much as Jett, who was flying around the court all the time, but enough that you were like, okay, that's a flash that I could buy into. And then, for certain shots, like, from the corner, where he's blue, he's 2 of 6. So, there's not enough volume for you to really take anything from it. And, that right wing, he makes 2 more shots. All of a sudden it's 40 something percent. I think just the volume is so low there that, there is some, variation that very easily could have sent him the other way, and vice versa from his hot spots too. But I think, it's all stuff that'll even out. And, just as another, tip in his cap, Jonathan Givony, as we speak, just was on Sports Center saying that Bryce Sensabaugh could be the biggest steal in this draft. So I think that, again, it's, some of these rankings are not always based on actual skill or what the scouts believe, but kind of maybe intel or whatever, and going against the grain. But if you get on a guy like Givony on TV and you get asked who's going to be the biggest steal, he has the freedom a little bit more so freely to say Bryce Sensabaugh. So, but yeah, as far as the shooting, I'm not saying he is the best shooter, but I think that he's in the conversation, and he was so efficient that it's hard to argue that he's not at least in that conversation. And again, he was shooting a lot of difficult shots, more so than, a guy like Grady, who definitely shot difficult shots. I mean, creating your own shot off the ball is a skill. Jordan Hawkins similarly did the same thing, running around. He was taking crazy, ridiculous shots, even if they weren't a lot of dribble jumpers. And Jett's degree of difficulty on a lot of the shots were crazy too, because he could shoot it off the bounce or fly off a million screens and take a split second to release it. So, but I think overall his shot package from the mid range in combination with, his 3-point shooting is at least, would be my argument as for why you would at least have him in the top 5.
And then shooting concerns at all, my shooting concerns anyway for Jett.
So with Jett, I don't know. This is tough for me. I think for me, you have to understand, like, I've really been trying to put this out there. Like, it really is a projection thing for me with Jett, an eyeball test, a gut thing, something that I would, from the very beginning, something that Corey always like harped on and taught me is that numbers are incredibly important, right, to analysis and for us to break down these players. But without us having a gut and without us having our own set of eyes, those numbers could actually be detrimental, right? I think it's so important to balance what we're seeing in terms of percentages and what we're seeing with the eye test. And that's something that Corey has always talked about from the very beginning when we started doing the Draftdaq NBA pod. Was that like 2 years ago already, Corey? Unbelievable.
I mean, this is we did 2021, 22, 23.
Third cycle. So, but shouts to Corey for always being a great mentor to me. But I just want to say, like, with Jett, it really is a gut thing for me. Like I watched the guy, and Corey highlighted some of the things with Jett and his game, right? He's a guy that with Michigan, they had him coming off pin downs, they had him coming off of all kinds of stuff, just literally running all around the court. And sometimes, it really had to be a quick shot that he had to get up there, and he hit him at a pretty good clip. And you want to talk about shot charts, and his shot charts from the corners were excellent, and from the right wing was really good as well, and from the mid-range pretty good as well. Not high volume, any of those, but I just believe it. And the biggest thing for me that I think sets him apart is that Corey mentioned a great name in Grady Dick. Like, I think there's a huge difference between Jett Howard and Grady Dick, because Jett Howard, you can actually put the ball in his hands and have him run pick and roll. That's not something you're going to see Grady Dick do a lot of in the NBA, although he did it a little bit at Kansas, very little, who I actually wrote about last week. But Howard is a guy that you could actually see him running pick and roll. Like, you watch him split the double sometimes, you're like, oh God, like where did that come from? For a guy with his size. And there's something that I forgot to mention with him is there's like real flexibility to him as well for a guy his size. The way that he moves, the way that he can fit himself through like tight spaces is pretty amazing for a guy his size. And I think with Jett, like, you start adding all that together and projecting, okay, in the NBA on that next level with better coaching, with better players around him, with better spacing, what does that look like? And for all the different actions that they had Jett Howard running off of, that Michigan team sure loved to throw the ball to Hunter Dickinson and just let him cook. And, that's not super,
Big Ten basketball, baby.
Big Ten, exactly. That probably wasn't super fun for a Jett Howard or a Kobe Buffkin to play with all the time. But, so that's why, once again, like you just have to start to take, okay, here's a flash of this and here's a glimpse of this. And then you start putting it all together and going, okay, in the NBA, with a much better, which with much better spacing and a different system, you can start to dream. You could start to believe. You could start to see a different player than what he was able to flash in college in the situation that he was in. So I understand that there are concerns with Jett's game. My goal wasn't to come on here and to say that I think Jett Howard is a bulletproof prospect. My point is, with his holes, with his warts, as you mentioned before, I feel it in my gut. I feel it in my bones. I really believe that he has a skill set to become much more than what he was able to show in Michigan. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And you both bring up a good point. To anybody that's listening to this at this point, that's pooing on it, the number one thing you should be looking up if you have access to Synergy or something like that, guarded versus unguarded shots, especially from three. That's something that you really need to pump up prospects, the guys that get a ton of shots where they have people in their face and their percentages still maintain 40%. They still maintain 36.8% from three on really good volume. It's part of the reason why I've never swayed on Keontae George either. He not only had to play out of position at small forward, but he also had to take a ton of tough threes like that. Partially like Cam Whitmore's a little like that because there were so many times that Villanova team was like, hey, we got 5 seconds left. Go figure something out, Cam, on that end as well. So that's what these two are talking about, guarded versus unguarded. Like these two prospects definitely have that for sure. Like I said, I still have my my qualms, but yeah, you can't argue with that part. The last one I want to give individual concerns for both guys that I want y'all to address. Number one, let's start with Brice. And I'm going to try and put it into one stat just to give like a brief little micro thing of, okay, this is what's super concerning. 34% usage for Bryce Sensabaugh. I almost said Bryce Simon. Shout out Bryce Simon. I don't know why I'm thinking about you. Bryce Sensabaugh, 34% usage. That's more than Brandon Miller. That's more than Scoot Henderson. That's more than even an upperclassman like Jalen Wilson, who basically was the foundation of the offense for Kansas. I think like you pretty much have to give Bryce Sensabaugh that level of usage if you want him to be a good NBA player, right? And for somebody that had a near 2-to-1 turnover to assist ratio, how do you reconcile that of like, okay, this guy's going to come in, and you've said it a couple times, like he can remake his game. How does he go from 34% usage, taking up all these shots in the mid-range, not really creating for others, continuing to be a defensive concern? How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, he started off the year and played a lot of the year off the bench. And a lot of times if you're coming in as a heat check guy, your job is to come in off the bench and score. So partially, I do think that some of it had to do with his role. His role was you were on the floor, we're going to get you the ball, and you're going to create a shot, and you were going to score. I think that in the NBA, the systems that a lot of these teams play in will, kind of force him, especially early on in his career, to, alter his game and make, slight changes to it. I still think that he's a guy that when he gets the ball, you're going to be like, hey, we want you to be aggressive. We want you to look for your shot. But I think one of the things, the assisted turnover ratio, I don't think it tells the full story, because I think he got better as the year went on at creating plays. I think when he was given, more responsibility, more roles, I think the kind of thing is like, if you look at like him versus a guy like Cam Whitmore, some of the flashes that Bryce Sensabaugh showed as a passer, hitting the weak side, leveraging, some of that stuff in the post to make, slick passes out of it. They're flashes that make you go, oh, he could do this. And there's some level of feel there. There's some level of vision. Some of the attacking and the drop-offs, the getting in the mid-range and hitting cutters. it's level of feel, their flashes. And when you're looking at prospects, the reason that he is not a potential, a lock to go in the top 5 is because the draft is about projection. A lot of times we're looking at guys to be complete players, and they are not that yet. We have to use our imagination based on some of the things that we saw, and we have to decide, is this realistic? Is it not realistic? I don't think that these are a lock for him to develop fully, because I think that it's going to be, does he find the right fit, the right coach to help him develop that? I mean, it took DeMar DeRozan, who's a guy that I comped him to. You mentioned earlier that he's a comp to. How many years to figure out how to be a playmaker in the league, and not just how many years, how many coaches before he got to the right coach that allowed him to expand his game at a time where most people probably would have thought he was done developing. So the NBA is funny in that way, is that a lot of time, even with the guys who are established, it still takes the right fit before, you have somebody, kind of flip the perception of what they can and cannot do. So with Brice, it's me just buying into these flashes. They're certainly not things I'm going to argue are strengths, but I think that I'm a little bit higher on them and I would call them improvement areas rather than weaknesses, because I think a weakness is a guy like Gigi Jackson or maybe even Cam, who didn't even show any flashes this year. Like, you can go through all of their games, you can go through their synergy clips, and you are not going to find high level passing or even want to passing. There's never going to be an improvisational read for these guys. And I think Brice differs in that regard. And, you talk about the usage, and, he's still a low turnover guy based on how heavy his usage is. He's just not making plays for other people necessarily. But when you are that good at scoring, and it's the college game, and it's by far your best offense is to let Brice efficiently, score the ball. As a college coach, you're probably not going to strategize how to develop him into a better NBA player. You're trying to win games. So I think an NBA team will have a better plan for him, and hopefully he expands his game, because I think that there's a big difference with a guy like Brice, who has that in him, versus a guy like Cam Thomas, who is undeniably an incredible bucket getter, even in the NBA. He just doesn't have the want to be anything more than that. And I think Brice will.
Yeah, and Brice has a couple different outcomes. Like, if he wanted to be Harrison Barnes, he could be Harrison Barnes, right? Just stand in the corner, do those kinds of things. If he wants to be Paul Pierce, then you can find that team. If he wants to be DeMar DeRozan, again, try and line yourself up with that team that's going to allow you to explore that space. Like you said, the medical, I didn't want to bring up the medical because that's, again, we don't have access to it. Like you said, we don't know. It's why I'm down on him. But again, I don't know. None of us know. Nobody's going to tell us that. Jett Howard, though, it pains me to hurt any of my fellow Wolverines, but 5% total, 5% total rebounding percentage, 8.7% defensive rebounding percentage. That's uno. I'm holding up one-digit offensive rebounding percentage. That's lower than Marquise Noel, who is 5'7", 155 pounds. That is lower than Dimitri Roberts, who's 5'8", guard for Fairleigh Dickinson. And why I just focus on this one stat is physicality. That's what it comes down to me for Jett. Being the Michigan fan, following them 100%. That's the part that we all talked about. I had Kellen Voss on multiple times from Mason Brew, and he just kept saying the same thing. When the moment arose, Jett shied away from it, which unfortunately is true. Jett only took 31 shots at the rim. You couple that with the rebounding percentage, you couple that with a lack of defense, it all boils down to physicality. I'm glad that you said it seems like he wants to play more physical, because that's just what it comes down to me. It's like, I do not know how physical Jett wants to be.
That's cool. I'm okay with all that. My thing is this: Jett Howard's still really young. I think something, the oldest saying in the book is growth is not linear, right? And I think with Jett Howard, his area of improvement that needs to happen is everything that you just outlined, right? The physicality aspect of it is really, really important. The rebounding is something that I've talked about a ton, is something he needs to work on. I think his role in Michigan was interesting as well, as we've outlined on offense. They had him running around all the time. It's not always, going to create the best opportunities for him to grab offensive rebounds, but at the same time, I don't want to sound crazy biased about Jett Howard either. I have to be objective, and that's something that he needs to work on. What you mentioned, right, with him attacking the basket, that needs to happen as well. He only took 2.6 free throw attempts per game, which is not good enough. If he's going to be the player that I think he's going to be in terms of scoring averages and scoring ability and all that stuff, then that 2.6 number has to be double, triple, quadruple, right? But the one, the one thing that makes me happy though is that he did on those small, on that small sample size, was he was still 80% for the free throw line, and with diminishing athleticism because of the injury, he still, was able to end the season right around 37% from three as well. So look, I don't want to defend him in those areas. Those are areas that he needs to work on. But the truth of the matter is, all these prospects have areas of improvement, and that's why they're prospects. They're not NBA players yet. They're not finished products. And for me, considering the baseline foundation of what Jett has and what he's going to walk into the league with in terms of ability, I'd like to take a bet on that guy. A 6'8" wing with those types of ball skills. I'd like to take him and put him in the gym and make him stronger. I'd like him to use the shooting gravity to now leverage that into some mid-range opportunities, some opportunities all the way to the rim. I think he can do that. He showed some ability from the mid-range. He didn't take a lot of them, but he has that ability. He has that touch at the rim too. I think when he got going and he was attacking the rim all the way with, when he was a little bit healthier, I think that stuff looked good as well. Does it need to get better? Absolutely. But his grown man strength hasn't come in either. That's going to come in. That's going to happen. As I mentioned right now, pre-draft process, I've seen all kinds of clips and videos of him doing, he's hitting the bench and trying to get stronger in the upper body, which is going to help him as well. So once again, I really think it's important to not lose the context and the lens of the fact that he played through injury. And people can say that he shied from the big moments or whatever. Well, you try playing on some bum ankles and tell me that you're going to be, looking beautiful in crunch time as well. So I think when he's healthier with a better NBA physique, not that he's a bad NBA physique, and also looking at his frame, I think he's very easily going to throw on muscle. His dad had a great physique in the NBA as well. He's got good genes. I think he's going to be there. So I hope that was a good defense, but also I'm there with you. Like, those concerns are valid, and he's got to work to get better in those areas if he's going to reach his full potential.
Yeah, I think Jett also has an easy fix with the rebounding. Just don't play him at power forward. Just move him over to shooting guard. He can play shooting guard, and at 6'8", he's a gigantic mismatch, right? Like, that's probably the easiest market. If I was on Jett's team, I guess I technically kind of am on Jett's team, being the Michigan alum. That's what I would be saying. Is like, just move him to shooting guard. Look at how well he moves around and stuff. You can't find a 6'8" guy like that. He's a better athlete than Grady Dick. Why not just put him at shooting guard then? And then the whole perspective on him changes. But the rest of the physicality stuff does not. The defense is still super concerning, the lack of getting to the rim. But why I wanted to hear from both of y'all, you both said it, complimenting Cade Cunningham, right? Both of these guys absolutely have games that complement Cade Cunningham. Bryce Sensabaugh maybe a little less so if he's going to take that many shots in the mid-range, but the ability to shoot threes that well. And it's super easy to be like, that guy's going to be a good corner 3-point shooter, right? He's one of the more easier ones to be like, I'm fine with him just standing in the corners and he'll excel in that role. Defensively, probably not so much of a fit alongside this core. It's part of what I've been trying to pump up here. Woodward Pistons is like, I don't even care if anybody can shoot anymore. I just want somebody that knows how to play defense. That's the bigger concern for me here. So this has coincided very well. I know it took a while for us to get together, but I think it's coincided well because yesterday, the talk for Pistons have been, potentially they'll trade down to 9-16 with Utah. Bryce Sensabaugh and Jett Howard could be there at 9-16. It's why I wanted to talk about it, and especially now, is because I think that's a plan that is sustainable. It probably makes me a little upset because the defensive stuff is still not quite there. Also, I think who I want at number 5 will be gone. So 9-16, if that happens, definitely we should be looking at Bryce Sensabaugh and Jett Howard because they do have skills that complement Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, Beef Stew. So last thing I want to ask you, I know we only got a little bit of time left. You're Troy Weaver. You're there at number 5. Who do you take?
Well, who's available, I guess, is the real question.
Like the consensus top 4 goes. Wembanyama's gone, Scoot's gone, Brandon Miller's gone, Amen Thompson's gone. We'll throw those 4 out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking Jarace Walker. He's a guy I've had at either 3 or 4 on my board for since, I don't know, last summer.
Jarace is made of lions. Go listen to that
Yes.
podcast. That was a while ago. They've done 2 podcasts on Jarace. I implore all of you go listen to those right now.
Yeah, I think Jarace can be a star. I think his floor is basically being a complementary, ancillary defensive star who, could make plays. And I think his high end upside is all NBA player who has the kind of offensive upside that we didn't get to see at Houston. But unbelievable footwork for a man as thick and as tall as he is.
So really I want to stop you real quick. Can you both talk about his skill level at IMG Academy? Because it's been something that I've been talking about to the audience here. The passing, his shot creation ability, like that stuff was really impressive.
He brought the ball up the floor as a point guard a lot of times at IMG, and this is on a team with Jett Howard and with Keontae George. A lot of times he was the initiator there in that offense. He was a guy who you could use on the elbows and put him in horn sets as, kind of a hub, like you would a Jokic or a Sabonis. And then he was also a guy that was doing stuff, creating from the perimeter at isolation or running pick and rolls. And, we saw that even at Houston. Sometimes Houston would run like inverted pick and roll with Jarace and Marcus Sasser, and Sasser would pick and pop and Jarace would initiate that. And they didn't go to it enough, or, but they went to it. And, when I had Marcus Sasser on the show and I broke down film with him and I asked him about Jarace, he was like, yo, like we call him a guard at practice because you don't understand what he can do with the ball in his hands. And he really just sacrificed for the greater good of the team as a freshman, understanding that this is a team with a lot of upperclassmen with aspirations to win a national championship. Now, they fell short of that national championship, but they had a tremendous season. They won a ton of games, and Jarace was a big part of that. And, again, you only saw certain flashes, but to me, if he and Cam had switched places, I don't think Cam could have done what Jarace did for Houston. And I think that if you gave him the kind of freedom to create his own shot like Cam Whitmore had at Villanova, I think people would be thinking about how insane of a prospect Jarace Walker really is. So yeah, you can go search YouTube IMG Academy full game, and you could find some of Jarace's old games and watch them. Or if you have Synergy or, Instat, you could pop that on. But his skill level was off the charts on both ends of the floor because, he's guarding just about every position in high school, 1 to 5. And he did a lot of that even at Houston. And for some reason, there was a narrative where kind of like people were like, yeah, Jarace is not actually a good defender. And it's like, all right, so you didn't watch basketball this year. That's cool. And then because like people shot really poorly against him in every scenario, he had a higher block percentage than Taylor Hendricks. Just a really disruptive guy, strong, could hold his ground in the post. I mean, going to be absolutely switchable.
7'2" wingspan.
Yeah, so he's been my guy, my favorite player to watch for a long time since he was at IMG Academy, because he's a basketball destroyer.
Everything Corey said, it's there's not much to add there. I mean, Jarace is unbelievable. I think in my brain, I'm like, dude, he could one day average like 18, 12, and 8 with 3 stocks per game, like no problem, and just be unbelievable. I think, and you talk about the Cade fit, right? Well, how about you throw Jarace next to Cade and tell me that doesn't make sense? And I'll say,
or those inverted pick and rolls with the Ivy, like, come on.
Corey and I believe Corey said it first, but actually, I shouldn't put words in your mouth in case I'm wrong, Corey, so correct me if I'm wrong here.
Sure.
But I don't love the Cam Whitmore fit with Detroit. If Whitmore and Jarace are on the board, I don't see it as a conversation, even for me personally. You guys can feel otherwise. I people out there, your listeners, could feel otherwise, but I don't think it's even close, because once again, you go back to the IMG stuff and you really watch the IMG. Corey and I, we did a preseason pod about Jarace, and all we had to go off was the IMG stuff. And we're like, cool, just going off of this, he's going to be top 4 for us. Like, he's no question, just unbelievable. And then the season played out and we're like, oh, okay. still good, still really freaking good. So that's how I feel about Jarace. I couldn't agree more with everything that Corey said, and just the outlook. It makes sense, like people have thrown around, the whole Draymond comp and stuff like that. And it's like, well, why not? He has all the ability, the handle, the passing, the shooting upside with him. Even like people are excited about Cam Whitmore and his shooting. I feel better about Jarace and his shooting. That's just how I feel, to be honest. And people may think I'm crazy, but that's just I think it's there. The mid-range shooting was there in high school, and I think it's gonna come back, and he's gonna do more of that in the NBA, and doing stuff out of the short roll. Once again, I'm right there with Corey. I believe in all that. I think he'd be an unbelievable pick at 5 for the Pistons.
So I'm right there with both of you guys. I have him at number 3 on my board as well. Everything you just said. One thing that I've been trying to say again and again is it's super rare that a freshman comes into a team with national title aspirations like Houston, and they're like, hey, you're going to run the defense. You're our defense. You're going to do everything here. We're going to, throw you on the best guys. You're going to be able to defend down low and block Brandon Miller in certain spots. You're going to be able to go and eliminate guards. Like, I can't even remember the last freshman prospect that came into a team that, again, is pushing for a national title that they just turned the defense over to. And he was still the second leading scorer at Houston. I don't know what the big deal about, like, oh, he didn't score very much and whatever. And it's like, yeah, but he created all these other shots. And again, he's the second leading scorer for Houston. So I don't know what to tell you at that point. And then the other thing is my comp for him is somewhere between OG Anunoby and Bam Adebayo. He's got Bam's passing chops. He's got Bam's defensive versatility, but he has that OG Anunoby-like ability to handle the ball, to shoot some. OG weirdly played shooting guard this year. I don't know that Jarace could do that in the future, but I wouldn't put it out of the question for all the things that y'all just said. So thank you again so much. Again, if you have not listened to both of the Jarace podcasts, it's Jarace Walker's Made of Lions. And what is the second one? I forget the title of the second one.
I think it was Basketball Destroyer, but
something.
Yeah, go look up Draftdaq, No Ceilings, the podcast on Jarace Walker. They will inform you of all the fantastic things Jarace Walker can do on the basketball court. So again, thank you so much to Corey and Albert. Draftdaq. Go to NoCeilingsNBA.com. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed there. Follow everything that they do. Go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And definitely subscribe to the No Ceilings podcast there, where you will find the Draftdaq. And last but not least, NBA Draft Dude on YouTube. Look at that. It's some of the best analysis and breakdowns. I mean, these guys interview actual prospects, from Taylor Hendricks. I believe Colin Castleton was the most recent one that y'all have done. Thank you so much for the Marcus Sasser interview. It's what I use for the pitch on Jarace, because he said he had one of the best handles there at Houston, which is another thing that goes unheralded. So guys, let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter, Instagram, and everywhere else.
You can follow me at Corey Tulaba on Twitter, NBA Draft Dude on most other social platforms. And you could find all of the work at NoCeilingsNBA.com or No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel, and the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed, which is 5 days a week. The content on the site is 5 days a week. The podcast is 5 days a week. And we upload daily on the YouTube and the socials. So we had an awesome social media person. Shout out to Paige for absolutely killing it this year with that. So yeah, that's where you could find me on the World Wide Web.
You can find me at Alberto Ghim on Twitter, on Instagram. Why did I say Instagram so weird just now? I apologize for that. You can find me on Instagram at GTGNBA. Is where you can find me. Before we go, just want to say, Steve, appreciate you having us on once again. This probably should have happened sooner, but apologize for us just being kind of crazy busy. And
no, I mean, I think you were trying to call Joe. It seems like he's on the phone with the league he's trying to call John Morant, but they said he's somewhere partying. I don't know.
But Corey, as Corey's mentioned, like we've been so swamped and been writing so damn much that I don't even think we realized like how much writing we had to do during this last stretch. So it's been kind of a whirlwind, but thank you so much for having us on. This was a blast. Would love to come back and chop it up with you once again.
Yeah, you're always welcome to come back here on the show, also on my podcast. Anytime y'all want to come on, you're always welcome, and perspective is always welcome. I'm glad y'all are here to entertain us. And again, go listen to Draftdaq. If you take nothing else away from this, go listen to the Draft Deck, because it's not another boring NBA draft podcast. They actually give objective viewpoints, even if they're prospects that they're all in on, and the energy is always high, because that's the thing that I think turns me off to most podcasts. Y'all always keep the energy up. So thanks again.
Our pleasure. We got to take it to 11.
Appreciate it.
Always, always.